There has been a genuine shift in approach from Arsenal this season, but particularly from Mikel Arteta himself. Previously, one word has been continually used when critiquing Arsenal and Arteta, or used as proof of what needs to change if Arsenal are finally to get over the line, and that word is risk. Now, I've said numerous times I don't agree with the notion that Arsenal are risk-averse, at least not to the extent of some of these kinds of headlines that have been levelled at Arsenal and their boss in the past. However, I do agree that in some areas, risk is something Arsenal have to take more of. And there must be some validity to these claims, otherwise I wouldn't be about to dive into such depth of what has changed this season for Arsenal as they sit top of the table. And for some, Mikel Arteta has finally taken the handbrake off. That is another tag I find slightly unconvincing, and I'm going to try and myth bust a few narratives along the way today, but as this video will show, the handbrake for Arsenal, at least for me, was already off. But before, it may just have been stuck in between gears a little. Welcome back to the Harvey Gratian YouTube channel. I'm so glad you found us or are joining us once again. Directness, tempo and intent. These are some of the words Arsenal have upped this season, and to show you how Arteta and Arsenal have done this, my analysis today is going to focus on 6 different points. Our use of first touches, how we are baiting presses differently, new structures and positional tweaks, what we do differently when regaining the ball, why urgency is so crucial, but throughout all, who is on the pitch might just be the most important factor of all. Let's start with a dodgy translation from an interview with new Arsenal assistant coach Gabriel Heinze. It centres around one word. Spoiler, it's risk. If I'm better than the opponent, then I have more possibilities. And from here, Heinze continues, there is only one way forward: to take risks. What Heinze is actually saying is, if you are truly the superior side, then by taking risks, you're actually just giving yourself more of a chance for your superiority to assert itself. Risk then, not just in football terms, is simply putting possibility into play. This graph though, measuring time delaying a restart this season, shows Arsenal may still have a bit more work to do. But risk doesn't just mean leaving one person back to defend a counter-attack. That's self-sabotage. But risk is how you calculate when to lean into its chaos when the time is right. Sometimes, as Arteta said himself, you can maintain all your principles, but it's those small adjustments on top that make the biggest difference. One of these adjustments is the rise in Arsenal's use of first touches this season, creating those staggered, fast, vertical connections that have boosted our threat through the middle of the pitch. Look how intentionally our midfield box narrows, staggers its height to facilitate Zubimendi's breaker, Rice's layoff and Nwaneri's first timer. The pre-season match against Athletic Club didn't just debut the Rice and Zubimendi pairing and all their complementary movements and how Calafiori went roaming around them, but also how we were going to see more of this. Saliba whipping it through to Odegaard, who, changing his heights, bounces it to Zubimendi, playing around in the cover shadow and inside spaces, who knocks it first time to Saka, and we are out and running. Remember, Zubimendi gives us that organisation on the ball without, a lot of the time, actually needing to touch it at all. This is what I said about Zubimendi earlier on in the season. Whatever happens this season, I think we will all be looking back at this signing and saying, yeah, in retrospect, it was pretty obvious that in order to get to the place that we are desperate to get to, or to reach that next level, we needed to sign Martin Zubimendi. I think that is going to become even truer as time goes on. Here, there are lots of first-time bounce passes, and Zubimendi is making it hard for Gibbs-White to cover him and press Mosquera at the same time. Odegaard lays it off, and Zubimendi changes the direction on the dribble, bringing in Calafiori, who has stacked and drawn Ndoye into this tip of a diamond spot. Calafiori flicks it to Odegaard first time, who can release 2 of our new signings, who are hungry and immediate in their runs. This links into how we are baiting presses for me more effectively. Mosquera is equally brilliant at this manipulation and punchy ball progression. Look how deliberately here, after adjusting Gibbs-White all the time, he rolls the ball deeper, goading Gibbs-White further, who Zubimendi drags away further, helping open that lane to Nwaneri, who wriggles away from Anderson and cuts in Madueke. Look at how everything isn't quite so ball to feet suddenly. We are stretching teams in different ways, and this is allowing us to hold the ball a bit more in the middle. We can wait for Paqueta's jump, which leaves Bowen in between markers and Fernandes unwilling to follow Odegaard, who has left our box midfield shape again to drift narrow and become more relational. Calafiori loves those weird angles to play at, but has the intelligence to hold on to Rice's pass, invite, then hits Odegaard, who can importantly time his arrival into these zones further left, and he instantly releases. We're not rushing it down the sides anymore, but biding our time before snapping into action. As the season has gone on, I think we have mixed our paces between this better too. We started at Old Trafford with the speedy releases and almost hot potato football that we saw on the opening day, a kind of learning on the job that Arteta stressed post-match. He said that the basketball game that we saw develop was not because we were wrong in wanting to attack bigger spaces at speed, but simply because our execution of that was off on the day. Compare that to St James's Park, where we blended control and quieting the game with these calculated moments to turn the speed dial up. So there's a lot of instruction to this, that much is clear, but it also reminds us of how it's the players that are making these split-second decisions on the pitch in real time. Look at how Arteta speaks about Calafiori, how he gives us different energies, makes us unpredictable, gives us a chaos to disrupt an opponent's organisation. That is not a coach who is trying to rein his players in. This is why we see Calafiori hunting for gaps around the pivot, roaming to the right, shimmying past a man and driving through the half space. It's what makes him think forward first on a 50-50 instead of what happens if we lose the ball. It's what makes Zubimendi so insistent here on breaking lines, flying into a counter-press each time before freeing Saka. I won't get bored of repeating how ball losses can become more productive, and sometimes you just have to risk that pass or dribble. That's what we've done better at this season. Let's cast our minds back to Saka's strike against Leeds. Rice has chosen to double up on the right hand side, and that freedom to move up, down, side to side is something he picked out in an interview on international duty earlier this week. Zubimendi this time is the one firing into Rice, who bounces to Nwaneri, who attempts and loses the dribble, but look at the rest defence. Look at Rice delete 10 yards in the space of half a second. Remember, in risk, there become more possibilities. Rice snaps in, and in 2 touches, Zubimendi has moved it onto Timber, who in his own 2 touches slips in Saka, who has found himself hanging on the shoulder off the last line more, and Saka does the rest. There are 2 other points that can be drawn from this sequence: the positional tweaks of Saka's narrowing and the flexibility of how Rice and Zubimendi can pair up differently across the pitch, but also our urgency after regaining the ball. Now, urgency can be a difficult thing to show on video, but for me it's the single biggest factor of what's changed in Arteta's messaging to the players. And what we do after winning the ball back is the best way to show this to you for me. Raya launches forward here, and although I've got a dedicated video to Gyokeres coming, we've spoken about the immediacy of his runs, that intent to steal a yard to claim the space, especially after we win it back. But it also shows that, more out of necessity, Gyokeres being not the same kind of crutch to lean on when we go long as a Kai Havertz. We have to get more creative with our ideas. Eza is in the soft zone below our narrow pinning front line, and Zubimendi and Rice get the jump on Joelinton and Bruno to the second ball. Their coverage, Rice and Zubimendi, is brilliant, and Zubimendi, instead of securing the second ball, hits it straight away on the bounce to Timber, making that blindside dart. Timber is equally early on his cross, and Eza can get a quick shot off from hovering in these central spots. If you wanted more proof of this, Here are the stats showing how speedily we are releasing the ball this year, with Zubimendi not only at the top, but with fast, progressive passes, a feature to his game too. His first touches are always in his head, and that's what allows him to slip Eze in behind here. Arteta, it's fair to say, has platformed this more, and he's added some structural tweaks of his own on top. I'm not talking about Rice and Zubimendi playing with their heights and distances as we've seen all season, but above them, this felt genuinely new, genuinely left field. It's that diamond or cluster I was speaking about post-Newcastle, allowing us to accommodate Rice's risky pass to Eze, who is in the role of the backboarder in this structure. Back to goal, panicking and attracting defenders and bouncing into the freed up Trossard, who becomes the releaser for Gyokeres, left to hang on the last line. This clustering was flexible too, and getting Eze around here, playing with pace, invention, slipping in runners, whether that's from beginning in this sort of free-floating 10 role or in this kind of wing fielder role that Trossard has played recently. These are great spots for him. And with Odegaard's injury, Eze will likely be playing more and more minutes in this right or free-floating 10 role, which we've tweaked off-ball to ease that transition, and he's probably playing in it more than Arteta would have initially expected himself. Against Manchester City, I agreed that an Eze, for example, felt needed from the start, which would have given us an ability to take advantage or to punish Man City in the ways that this video has shown Arsenal are trying to do so far this year. That was a missed trick from Arteta for me, and it felt like Arteta's prioritisation of familiarity and dynamics over new ideas came to the fore there, but his proactivity, I was keen to emphasise, in his half-time subs was absolutely not. And that formed a recognition from Arteta for me, that he accepts that we now have a squad full of ideas that he can trust. I found it interesting post-Olympiacos that Saka and Eze's switching of wings was not a player-led decision, but a collective choice. It's not about Saka moving to the left, it's about just mixing up our angles and keeping our threat unpredictable, which saw Zubimendi give and go with Eze moving into those higher zones where he does not just balance the team but adds his own qualities. And from here we move it to Saka, who shows his own gives and goes, his own directness and different kinds of finishes he can give on the left hand side. It's why I also don't buy into the idea that Odegaard should just move completely over to the left hand side. When he's in this higher touch, here, there and everywhere build-up role, let him arrive into these zones, and then, from there, tell him to be early and expansive. The same goes for Declan Rice when he has played higher this season. With Calafiori swirling around him, the Italian can move in lower, leaving Rice to arrive higher from deeper, or drift to the right and add some whips and more off-ball movement as he does here, giving Timber the space to drive into, which panics Newcastle. Eze does the same, feinting away from Bruno. Tonali now has to compensate, but Eze does not go straight into Zubimendi, but allows Trossard in that backboardy role to do it, and Zubimendi then lifts one just over the top. This is like the circuits of Wilshere, Ozil, Rosicky, Giroud that we saw under Arsene Wenger, and it came at a time in the match against Newcastle where it felt like we were trying to win or at least chase the game, not from minute 80, but from minute 55. To circle back to the beginning, it's hard not to draw through lines, I think, to Gabriel Heinze, who was all about narrow wingers in his philosophies and ideas, and up, back and through combinations that we've seen today. And like Saka has been, Martinelli stacks narrower here, becoming that backboard and flicking it into Gyokeres, who bounces it to Odegaard, the releaser. I like in this passage how you also have Ben White stretching on the touchline, and on the other side this would be a Hincapié or a Calafiori. The more I see this image too from the West Ham win, the crazier it gets, the more players I see where I go, how have you ended up there? Certainly then, this season Arteta, I've felt, has lent into the higher stakes style more, whilst keeping the fundamentals he's instilled in the side. And that's the key. It's not a swerve in play styles, but an extension of, a development of, an adaptation. Whether this refreshed Arsenal will lead us to the prizes that we all want, only time will tell. There has been misfortune in the past, sure, but I think we were at risk of believing that today's price was the same as yesterday's, which is never the case. And what I mean by that, it's now time to accept that things are different. It's time to be the protagonists of this title race. And although I don't think Arteta or Arsenal were ever totally risk averse, remember, it's about proving your superiority. In the past, I don't think we've maximised that. But this season, I feel that we have as great a chance as any of doing just that. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you very, very shortly in the next one. See you later.